there, this is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about making a 12-inch quilt block from the pattern Santa's Village. This is block 10 of our Saturday Sampler online quilt along. We're going to talk about the math, quick ways to make half square triangles, and flying geese units. So let's get started. Here's our block for this month. This is block 10. So it's a star with half square triangles and flying geese units around it. The grid on this is a 2-inch grid. So each of these squares finish at 2 inches. So here's a 2-inch solid square, a 2-inch half square triangle. This is a flying geese unit. So it's double the width. So it's a 2-inch tall by 4-inch wide flying geese, another half square triangle, and then a solid square. Let's look at the second row. These are also half square triangles, a solid square, and then another flying geese unit, and so on. So it's a pretty basic block. It's made up of squares, flying geese units, or half square triangles. They're 2-inch finished, which means they're unfinished at 2.5. If it's a double grid, 2 by 4, it's 2.5 by 4.5. So the center is a solid square as well, and that one is 4.5. There are 4 flying geese units of one color. So that's the green and the tan in this example. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then there are also 4 flying geese units of the red and tan. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's one hiding over there. And then the half square triangle units, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there's some quick ways to make half square triangle units 8 at a time. There's also quick ways to make flying geese units 4 at a time. So this is a perfect block for both of those techniques. Let's collect some supplies for our block. You will want some fabric, 3 different colors. We've chose red, green, and cream. So this one is our cream. It's a light color Moda Grunge fabric. Then you'll also need some sewing supplies. I'm sewing on a Bernina 590 with a 37D 1/4-inch presser foot. I'm using Aurifil thread. And then the other supplies that I'm going to use today is a small iron, the woolly pressing mat, then obviously the pattern, Santa's Village, and then the magic press that I love to use, which is my own coined name. It is Best Press and Terrial Magic. 2/3 amount of Best Press and 1/3 of Terrial Magic, and then I mix it up in this atomizer bottle. So we have all that stuff at the shop if you need some. We also have a couple of rulers. So my favorite ruler is a 6.5 inch or 7.5, a smaller size square. My favorite 6.5 of Creative Grids. It has the non-skid surface on the back, and these are wonderful rulers for cutting squares, and they fit your hand very nicely. The other ruler when you're starting to cut strips is also a Creative Grids ruler. This is a 3.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. So those rulers I love. And then I have 2 specialty rulers that I'm going to be using today. One of which is the Bloc Loc rulers. So one is a flying geese ruler, and this is a 2-inch by 4-inch finished Bloc Loc flying geese ruler. So that's a specialty ruler. And then the other specialty ruler I have, again, is Bloc Loc. It's a half square triangle, and this one measures 2.5. You can use many of the half square triangle rulers that are larger, and you just slide them to the 2.5-inch measurement. I'm going to use this because it makes it so quick and easy to square up our blocks. So we're going to use those specialty rulers. I've got a woolly pressing mat, a fabric-friendly pen. I've also got a really nice rotary cutter. I can cut right or left-handed, so this rotary cutter allows that, and it has a nice blade, and it's heavy, so it helps any wrist fatigue. I think that's it for supplies, a cutting mat, but that should get you started. All right, let's talk about the cutting that you'll be doing for your block. So today you're going to be making flying geese units, 4 of them in green, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you do 4 of them in red, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I'm doing 4 at a time, half square triangles, so I have a technique for that, and that is using a handout from Bloc Loc. It's called the No Waste Flying Geese Method. I'll provide a link to that description in the video, and you'll be able to download that link if you want. If you want to follow the directions in the pattern, they are wonderful. It's Santa's Village, and it's the traditional method of making flying geese 1 at a time, but they have great diagrams. You could certainly do that. Then the other thing that we need to make is half square triangles. Remember, we need to make 8. So I'm going to cheat on that and do 8 at a time half square triangles. Again, there is a document for that, so I will do that link for that video, or that document in the video as well. So let's get started with cutting. We're going to need some green fabric that is going to make that center star. You'll need one piece that is 4.5 inches, and then the flying geese units are made up of green and background, so I have background fabric down there. So this is where we're deviating from the pattern. If you're doing this with us in store or with our class online, we provide kits and a little description of paper of how we cut it differently than what the pattern says. So for the no waste flying geese method, you're going to need 4 3 1/8 inch squares of green. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then to go with that green fabric, you're going to need a large square of background, and that one's sitting there. It might be hard to see because it's kind of light, and that one is 5.5 inches. So you're going to cut 4 3 1/8 of the green, and then a 5.5 inch square of cream. You'll also want to do the same thing with the red. You're going to cut 4 3 1/8 inch squares of red, and then a 5.5 inch square of cream or background fabric. That will make your flying geese units 4 at a time. The other thing that you want, and I wanted to point this out, this would be a fun fabric. This is the center. It's 4.5 inches square, and that's going to go right in the center of the star. You could use a really fun Christmas fabric or a motif that's a little small one that could go right in the center. You could also focus some embroidery in there, so that would be a great spot to put something that you really like in the center. Or you can just use a green fabric, no problem. Now we're on to the half square triangle units. We need 8 of those. So those are these 2 big squares over there, and those are cut 6 inches square. So you need 1 square of red and 1 square of cream that is 6 inches. So that's going to get by with all of your half squares and your flying geese units. Remember, there are still some solid squares in the block. There are 4 on the outer ring and then 4 here. So we need 8 squares, and those are cut 2.5. This is AccuQuilt friendly. If you have some of the AccuQuilt cutters, this would be a great block to cut with AccuQuilt as well. We have a background square that's 5.5, and then we have 4 squares of green fabric that are 3 1/8. Those squares are going to lay right sides together and intersect opposite corners. They should overlap a little in the center, and what you're going to do is you're going to take your strip cutter or a ruler that's long enough, and it will intersect those 2 points, and you're going to draw a line. So you'll draw this line, and then from that line we're going to take it to the bed of our sewing machine, and we're going to sew on each side of the line. So we'll do that right next. We're going to start sewing our flying geese units. So I have a Bernina dual feed 37D presser foot. So I have a 1/4 inch presser foot. I have Orifil thread, and then the other tool that I have that makes this a lot easier is a straight stitch needle plate. So there's just a single hole in that. And I always start on the edge of a piece of fabric that is a little scrap. So when you start to feed in your next layer, you don't actually cut your threads. You feed in that next layer, line up the edge of the foot. So I'm going to use this left side, or you could also use the right side. I'm standing on the left side of the machine for this video, so that's where I'm going to go. And I'm going to line up the edge of the fabric with the line that I just drew on my fabric. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Once you have that done, you're going to go over to the other side, so the other side that I haven't sewn, and do the same thing with a 1/4 inch seam. So here we go. I end on my piece of fabric that I started with, and so that makes it nice and easy. I'll rotate and cut my fabric out. I just got done sewing the first step of my 4 at a time flying geese units. So now I'm going to cut right on the line that I marked. I'm going to use my strip cutter to do that, mark it, and then cut right down that line. Then you're going to take it to your pressing mat, and you're going to press these so that it looks like a little heart. So this is going to come up, and that's going to go towards the dark fabric. So you're going to press that, and I love this woolly pressing mat for getting my seams nice and flat. You'll do the same thing to the other side, so you'll have 2 pieces that look like a heart, like so. The next step is to lay another square. So one will go to this heart and one will go to the other heart. And you're going to line that up in the corner where the background fabric is and mark from point to point again using your pen. You'll then again sew on 1/4 of an inch from that line. So you'll repeat that step for this one as well. I finished on a small scrap of fabric last seam that I sewed, so I'm going to leave that scrap in. Now I'm going to feed in my fabric, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from the line that I just marked. I'm going to do that both directions. I've sewn off the fabric. I just pivot that around, put it back in the machine. I also have something called hover engaged on this machine, so whenever it stops, the foot hovers just slightly up so that I can move my fabric. The needle is down in the down position, so this is a great feature for applique hover. So the needle's down, you can still readjust, and it hovers. I come off the fabric, and now I'm on my little scrap. You'll notice this method also reduces the waste of thread, so then when I pivot it around, I'll just trim those little threads, and there I have that piece there. We're now ready to cut this apart, so we're going to cut right on the line that we had drawn earlier, and this will yield 2 flying geese units. The other one will yield the other 2. Once you're ready to press this, you're going to press that towards the background, or not the background, but the green on this example, and you'll press that, and you will have a flying geese unit. Now this unit does not measure the exact measurement. The beauty of this is we're going to use our specialty Bloc Loc ruler, the Flying Geese 2x4, and we're going to square it. I'm going to show you squaring up your Flying Geese unit. Frequently when you're traditionally sewing Flying Geese units, you'll not have a straight seam along all the edges, nor will you have the 1/4 inch diagonal. So this specialty ruler is the Flying Geese 2" by 4" finished Bloc Loc ruler. It has a routed out seam. This will only trim down to a 2" by 4" finished, which is 2.5 by 4.5 unfinished. When you lie the ruler onto the fabric, it'll lock right into those 2 side seams on the diagonal. You'll also get that perfect point going to each diagonal point, and then you'll get a 1/4 inch reveal up here, so that when you sew it into your block, you'll have a perfect 1/4 of an inch seam, so you have nice points. So we're going to go ahead and trim around that. You'll hold your ruler and trim on all sides. Just have to trim that bottom one, so I'm going to rotate it so it makes it a little easier for you to see. Lock it back in. I've already trimmed those sides in this, and I just have this last side to trim away and get any excess away. So when you're all done, you'll have a perfect Flying Geese unit, which is measuring 2.5 by 4.5, and it's 2" by 4" finished. Your 4 green Flying Geese units all done. Don't forget to do the same method with your red, so you'll have 4 red. We're now ready to make half square triangles. We need to make a total of 8. Again, this technique is using the Bloc Loc ruler. We're going to cut a bigger square and subcut it. I'll have this in the video, link to it. It's also on our website, so you can download it there or look for it on Bloc Loc's website. The unit that we need to have here is a 2.5 inch unfinished half square triangle unit. So when I look at the chart, it tells me what size of square of the light and the dark that I'll cut. For our example today, that's a 6 by 6. So you'll get those ready with your red and your cream fabric. For our sample today, I'm doing it out of cream and blue. So today I have a cream Moda Grunge with a Kona Kaufman navy blue. Those are both 6 inches square, and so you'll lay those down right sides together. Make sure they're right sides together. And you're gonna mark on the fabric that you can see easier a diagonal line that makes an X. So each direction, diagonal line. You want a fabric friendly pen. You can use a strip cutter to do this. The other technique that is helpful to make sure that you actually have a square is to use a square ruler. This one isn't quite large enough, but what you do is you take that diagonal line and you line it up and intersect that point. it should intersect the other point when your ruler is larger. And that makes sure that you have an actual square. So if you really need perfection, marking the line with a 45-degree line on a big square is the best way to do it. Today I'm just going to take my strip cutter because it's long enough to intersect those 2 points, and I'm going to mark in each direction. Next, you're going to take it to the bed of your sewing machine and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch on each side of the line. So I've done that with this example. You can see that I've kind of used a matching thread. So a 1/4 inch on each side of the line. You can use the same technique of starting on a scrap and then sewing on each side. So we'll do that real quick. We're now ready to cut apart our square. So we're going to cut on the diagonal lines, and then we're also going to cut straight across through top and bottom, so the X and Y axis. So we'll cut the diagonal lines, and you don't want to shift your fabric as best you can, so try to leave it just stationary. So I'll cut the other diagonal direction, and then this square was cut 6 inches, so half of that is 3 inches. That should line up along the edge and it should intersect that center point. So I'm going to cut that direction, and then same way this way. So that's going to be 3 inches as well. Then this is the cool part. We just made 8 half square triangles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Isn't that cool? So all 8 of those are all finished. You'll press them so that the dart goes towards the dark fabric, and then you're going to square them up with the specialty ruler. I'm going to show you 2 ways to square up this unit. It's going to get squared up to 2 1/2, which is a 2-inch finish. So Bloc Loc makes a ruler for that, 2 1/2-inch finished half square triangle unit. The beauty of this ruler is what you do is you need to be able to read the ruler, so I can read the word Bloc Loc, and you want the seam pressed towards the dark, and you want it facing you. So when you lock it into place, that will lock right on the seam. It won't teeter-totter like a regular ruler. So a regular ruler doesn't have that cutout. When you lay that onto a ruler, it teeter-totters on the seam, so it makes it a little tricky to trim down. That's the cool thing about Bloc Loc. They've cut that out. It will lock into the seam. The points should intersect the points on the 45, and then I'm going to just square up all the way around the square. So this is going to be exactly 2 1/2 when I'm all done. So you'll just have these little trimmings all the way around, and right here I have a beautiful half square triangle that is 2 1/2 inches, 2 inches finished. The other way to square this up is to use a larger Bloc Loc ruler, and you'll have to slide the ruler to the correct measurement. The same thing applies. You need to be able to read the word Bloc Loc. The dark fabric or the seam should be facing you, so that seam is pressed towards the dark, and you'll first lock it in to that seam, and I'm going to trim here and here. Then I'm going to slide the ruler to the correct measurement and trim the other sides. So my first step is trimming just a little bit. For me, it's on the right and the top, and I'm going to pull that away so I have a nice square edge. I'm going to slide the ruler and look for the 2 1/2-inch mark. So I have a 2-inch mark there. There's 2 1/4 and 2 1/2. So right there, I found the 2 1/2-inch mark, and I'm going to trim here, the left and the other side. And now I also have a 2-inch finished, 2 1/2-inch unfinished half square triangle using a larger Bloc Loc half square triangle ruler. This makes it easy because it's all 4 sides, real quick and easy, or this one you just have to slide it to the measurement. Let's talk about assembly. You have made 4 green flying geese units using the 4 at a time, no waste method. Then you've also done 4 of the red, no waste method, and you made a bunch of half square triangles. So when you're starting to sew your rows together, this row here is made up of a solid square, a half square triangle, a flying geese unit, another half square, and then a solid square. How I would start to sew this block is I would create that center piece first. So I would sew my large square to my 2 flying geese units, and I'm going to show you a couple tricks for that. Then I would sew a row of solid, flying geese, and solid, and then I'd sew this row and this row to that piece that I did there. I do the same method here. I would sew a unit of half square, flying geese, and half square, and I would make that unit and sew it to the top and the bottom. Then I would sew a solid row there and there. So you really have 2 really long seams to worry about and some much shorter seams on the inside. So let's go. I'm going to just show you sewing that little piece right there, and we'll be finished. Tips for sewing the flying geese unit. So I have my solid square that is in the center laying right side up, and I'm going to flip this over so that it's right side down on the fabric. They should line up perfectly because we sewed them perfectly, right? When you're sewing along this edge, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam. There is an intersection of threads that marks an X. So that X is where you want your stitching to just be on the seam side of. So you want it to go through it, but just a little bit on the seam side. So that's what I'll be watching for. I'll watch the edge of my foot, which is my 1/4 inch guide. So I'm going to get ready to start sewing. You notice I don't pin, but you certainly may. I'm going to line up the edge of the fabric along the edge of the foot, and I'm sewing on a Bernina 590. There is a little tiny mark on the stitch plate that marks your 1/4 inch. When I can see that mark, I've done a very nice job of creating a perfect 1/4 inch. So I'm going to sew along that edge, and as I approach that intersection of thread, I want my needle on the seam side of it. So if you go real slow, make sure your needle is right on that seam side, and then just feed it through. So that's what that will look like. When you open that up, you'll get a nice perfect point. All right, we did it. We made block 10 of Santa's Village using the no waste method for flying geese, 4 at a time, and the 8 at a time half square triangle method. So thanks for joining me today. Please like and subscribe to our channel. We have lots of great videos. We also have an online website, so you can visit us there, TheSewingPalaceBernina.com. This is Jenny from The Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Bye-bye now.